Good afternoon. All right. Couldn't figure out what time it was. All right. My name is Clifford Mitchum, and I am with CREW. That CREW is short for Clean Renewable Energy Worldwide. In particular, I am focusing on Southwest Florida. So now, particularly since the hurricane, a lot of people are talking about solar power and the opportunity to make sure they have electricity should the grid go down. So that's why Bob invited me to hold the class for you all on Wednesday. He informed me that not everybody will be able to make it, so I pass on my cards to everyone. If you don't have a card already, let me know, and that way you can at least get in contact with me and I can get you some information. What I'm going to go over and cover is what solar power is, how it works, how it relates to the political standpoint, because last year in particular there were some amendments for solar power that one was good, one was bad, and then we need to discuss the future of solar because a lot of people want to be not connected to the utility, but due to legislation that is not possible. All right, but there is an option to produce so much power on your own through solar where you're not using utility at all, and in fact they can pay you, which is always better. So I wanted to cover those things and then how a person goes about getting an assessment. Because a lot of people think just because the square footage of a house is one thing, that's going to determine how much solar power will go on that home. When it's a little more complicated than that, not a lot, because it's dependent on how much power is used. You can have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, a retired couple, compared to a 3-bedroom, 2-bath with 3 teenagers. Completely different profiles, could be the same square footage for the house. So that's one of the key factors to look at. And then the second factor is sun exposure. A lot of people feel that solar is related to heat, but solar is more related to light. It doesn't like heat as much as people like to think, but nonetheless, it doesn't have any particular trouble in heat. But it does need light and exposure to that. Cape Coral in particular is fantastic for solar. It is a wonderful opportunity because there are so few tall trees over everything. Everything is pretty flat. So it's a great potential out here. And in particular to real estate, solar power is a home improvement. So it adds to the value of the home. Just like if somebody were to add a pool, a gazebo, or any other amenity, solar power goes into that. And then when they turn over that home, they can have a house that doesn't require an electricity bill. And if somebody is actually in a new home, within the first 6 months if they get solar, they can roll that into their mortgage. So that way they completely eliminate the bill, they eliminate all of the financing along with that that's connected to it. Because the key factor and the key change is that solar has financing availability, which was not the case several years ago. Plus, the price between 5 years ago and today has come down over 60%. So the potential is there. The key is that people that are close to home, in particular the real estate market, we need to get everybody updated on the changes that are out there so that way they can be informed when somebody is interested. So the key feature is to make sure we can solar power Southwest Florida and solar power the Sunshine State. I appreciate a few moments of your time. See you on Wednesday. All right, well, welcome today. My name is Clifford Mitchum, and I'm with CREW. The company is called Clean Renewable Energy Worldwide. And I'm going to go ahead and discuss for you all what exactly solar power is, how it works, and how it actually relates to the real estate industry. So this is a class format, so if you have questions, let me know. We can go ahead and address those as best we can and get through all of our material. So just starting out, CREW as a company, we're a member-owned cooperative. Now what we do is we streamline the process of going solar. Many people and organizations, they're not sure exactly how the process works, and in a lot of cases, it ends up being paralysis through analysis. There's so much to look at, so much to choose from, and so many different decisions to make that a lot of people end up just not making a decision at all. So we make that process easy. We partner with a few companies to make the process as streamlined as possible as well. The first company is GeoStellar. GeoStellar is a Sunshot Initiative award-winning company, which has its $40 million solar algorithm that can determine, just from looking at satellite pictures, how much sunlight is hitting the roof. That lets a person know, or a group know, how much power potential they have based off the sunlight that's hitting. And then we've also worked with, and they primarily work with our residential operation, our residential proposals and quotes, but we also work with a company called Solar Site Design, who is also a recognized Sunshot Award company, and it primarily focuses on commercial applications. So, now, how solar works is referred to as distributed power. Everybody's familiar with the regular power configuration. We have a central location, whether that be in coal, natural gas, hydroelectric, and then from there the power that's generated is generally done by burning a fossil fuel, whether burning that natural gas, burning that coal, which heats up a turbine, or heats up water, and that water creates steam, that steam spins a turbine, that turbine creates electricity, that electricity is sent miles and miles and miles to our homes and businesses. Now what solar power does, it creates the energy right on the spot. So, the sunlight hits the solar panels. The solar panels, through the photoelectric effect, causes a flow of electrons. That's referred to as direct current. That direct current comes down from the solar panels to what's called an inverter. The inverter converts the electricity into alternating current. And alternating current is what we use to run our regular appliances. Microwaves, telephones, television, and the like there. So now the key that makes, and then from the inverter, it goes to the meter and runs the meter backwards. So that way when the sun's not running, the meter runs forwards. Now this process is distributed because it's done on site. So you can have multiple locations with solar panels throughout a specific area without having to rely on just one central source that potentially could go down. It distributes the power production so that way it's spread out over all the applications that are available. In particular, for this application in the diagram here is for a factory facility where it has a nice open flat roof that the panels can be put on. So now when we look at a residential configuration, same principles apply. The sunlight hits the solar panels create the DC, goes to the inverter, creates the AC, and runs your appliances backwards, or runs your meter backwards, and then the power runs your appliances. So now, a lot of people, first thing that they mention is that they want to go off-grid. Now, to go off-grid means there is no connection to the utility at all. As you can see in this diagram, the configuration is actually attached to the utility grid, so the power company knows how much power is coming to and from the home. Now, to be off-grid means there's no connection to the utility at all, and that configuration is, for all intents and purposes, illegal. It is possible, but to get it accomplished is very cumbersome and difficult, so everyone just says no, unless it's a specific farm or agricultural application. So now what we do is referred to as blacking out, where there's so much power created on site by the solar array that the utility is not needed. So therefore, essentially, the effective result is an off-grid application because you're not using the utility power to cover your needs. So now, also with that, people have become pretty sensitive just due to Irma, Harvey, Maria, and the hurricanes that we've had. And it's pointed out a safety feature that's actually built into all solar configurations. It's called islanding. Now, in the event that the utility power goes down, the solar array would also go down. That's because when the power from the utility is actually cut, if the power from the solar array is going through the lines, you can cause a hazardous situation where a down power line can be close to a body of water, hurting people or becoming potentially dangerous to people around it, or the technician servicing that line expects the line to be dead and ends up live, and he ends up potentially dead. And so it doesn't really work out. So it's actually a safety feature built in. Now, to overcome the islanding, so in the event of inclement weather or a blackout, a configuration will need to have storage added to it. And that storage is referred to as batteries. There's several types of batteries between the common lead acid that many people refer to as the golf cart batteries. There's lithium that everybody's hearing about through Tesla's Powerwall and the advanced technology there. There's also saltwater batteries, which use salt water as their electrolyte to store their electricity. And then you have new technology referred to as a flow battery, which is for larger applications, but it has a continuous stream of electrolytes flowing through to hold on to the electricity and store it. So there's different configurations. All those are encompassed by the term storage. Now when someone has storage, their power continues to go because they're running off batteries. Just like on your laptop, when it's plugged to the wall, it goes indefinitely. when you disconnect it from the wall, that battery's only going to last a certain amount of time. Now, that certain amount of time is dependent on the cost effectiveness for the application. If someone's in an emergency application needs to have their power for any circumstance at all times, it's obviously going to be a larger storage array. Whereas someone just wants emergency power and to be able to cover the basics, it'd be a smaller storage array, and it'd just be a matter of which is most cost effective for their application. In Florida, ideally, a system would have about 2 days worth of storage. It's rare to get more than 3 days without sunlight, so the system can recharge over that time. But even if someone had a single day or just through the night, we refer to as a half day, it could fully suffice for their needs, because generally, once the sun comes back out, the batteries can be recharged and everything can go back to normal.
So, if you do lose power during a storm or something, can this be ran through or hooked up to a generator and have a generator kick in, or you just run off the generator?
This actually replaces the generator. They're both trying to do the same thing, so you wouldn't have them in that application. What I recommend for people, particularly in the home applications, if they're looking at a generator, I would tell them to look at a power storage system in that same amount. Because when you think about it, a generator, somebody's going to spend about $7,000, maybe more, to run their whole house off the generator, while that same $7,000 can go to a battery array or storage, and that storage can run their house every day throughout the day, throughout the week, and throughout the years, whereas the generator is only for those one-time applications. So it's more versatile to go with a storage system rather than going with just a generator, so it'd be more cost effective. Plus, the next portion we get into would be net metering. They can take better advantage of that because of the storage that they have added to their system. All right, great question. So now, net metering. This is actually getting paid for your power. Yes. So as I mentioned before, the system is connected to the utility grid and it has the meter. When the solar array is running, the meter is running backwards. Now when the sun goes down, the meter is running forwards. This is referred to as a grid interconnected system. So with a grid interconnected system, the utility company can tell how much is coming forward, how much is coming back. When someone has solar, generally, they're going to run their meter backwards more than they're going to run it forwards. Now based off how much they run it backwards, is going to determine how much they get paid. Because the utility company is going to compensate that homeowner or that property owner for the power that they created, the utility company diverted one place or another, and they didn't have to produce on their own. So that's how it gets paid. It's not a large amount sum. I'm not saying, hey, go ahead and retire, buy that second house out over in the Keys, because you're going to get something like that. It's a modest amount, a few hundred in some cases, a couple bucks in the other, but the idea is to make it a net zero. All right, so that way everything that was put out is recouped. So now, with those batteries and that storage I was referring to before, there's a company that we're going to be working with in the near future called JLM, and they work with industrial level storage. Now this storage would be able to cover retail location, warehousing, depending on how much power that particular site needs, and these are larger than what would be used on a home application. So now with these storage options, we have the JLM Energy storage. Forget the next one. Well, for this battery system, this would be for an on-site application, something larger like a large warehouse. Then you have one that'd be closer to more of a retail location or something that's small offices. And then you have some new technology that's in the third picture there, and that's with their on-site power storage, which it would actually be storing at the location of each solar panel. So it would be integrated into the solar array. So that's emerging technology. The key about storage is that it's dropping in price considerably. Elon Musk and Tesla have really motivated and revitalized the renewable energy industry, and with the plans that they have, they're causing pricing to drop considerably. Just from the inception of his gigafactory, it's actually forced prices to drop on batteries by about 20 to 30%. And that factory is only working at about, I want to say 30 to 50% capacity right now. Once it goes up to 100%, it's going to further reduce the pricing, making storage even more feasible and cost effective. And that's just with the first gigafactory that he has, and he has other ones planned. So with that motivation and seeing what the momentum he's created, a lot of other companies are also getting into the mix. Mercedes is making a storage battery. LG Chem has an established storage battery. That's a smaller name, or it's a big name in batteries, but it's generally behind the scenes. It's not a household name, but it's a subsidiary of the same company that makes the LG refrigerators and other appliances. That's one of the batteries that we actually use in our residential systems. So the potential there is becoming more and more significant, more and more great. So as the cost effectiveness becomes more affordable for everyone, we're going to see more of that storage coming online, which makes it easier to take advantage of net metering. Because if the meter doesn't have to run forwards at night because the battery system's there, it's more that a house can recoup or a building can recoup from the net metering program. So now, the main advantages of solar power is that it saves money. Over the life of about 25 to 30 years of a system, many homes are going to save between $10,000 and I've seen as high as $60,000. And that's in comparison to staying with the utility or switching to solar. So the cost savings is considerable. The environmental savings is difficult to even measure because when there's no pollution when solar's in place. Whereas when we're burning natural gas, we're burning coal, there's exploration, there's mining, there's transport, and then there's burning. So each stage of power production is pollution creation. And that pollution that we see relates to a lot of health problems, breathing problems in particular. Asthma significantly increases the closer that someone's home or facility is near to a power plant. And then we also have the ash and the runoff. There was actually in North Carolina, there was a coal ash spill where it turned an entire river orange due to the pollution of it. So the potential impacts and the environmental hazards that are related to the status quo just need to be overcome. And since we have advanced technology that can replace that, we need to go ahead and embrace that further, which is why it's so important to the real estate market. Because people are going to be looking for these applications, they're going to have these choices because everyone wants to play a part. Since we have distributed power available, it's not something that is left to just the big utility players. Every homeowner and every building owner can get in the game and reduce their carbon footprint and increase their green impact on the environment. So now, free marketing and advertising. Right? The first adopters of solar are the ones that get the articles written about them. They're the ones that get recognized on radio shows and the ones that become the inspiration for everyone else to follow. So that's a lot of free advertising that a company's going to end up receiving and a lot of free marketing as people recognize that. In our particular area, Babcock Ranch is the community that comes to mind. Right? So that one is a large community that has 385,000 solar panels to offset their power usage. They also have a natural gas as their backup, so they're not completely off-grid, but they've essentially blacked out the utility because the energy savings from their solar field is going to compensate for anything they may use from the natural gas. So it comes out essentially at net zero. So now there's also another community that I just recently found out about called Murata. It's out by a health park off Summerlin, and they have an option for when someone's building their home. It's a new community. So when someone's building their home, they have the option to add solar panels under a lease option, or they can go ahead and buy their solar panels outright. In my recommendation, in my professional experience, I highly recommend owning rather than leasing, just because it's going to be a better savings. A lot of leases, and I don't know if it's particularly the case in this community, but a lot of leases have what's called an escalator. And the escalator is the monthly amount that someone's going to pay for their system is going to increase over time, just similar to how the utility power increases over time, but just not as much. Whereas if somebody owns a system outright, they insulate themselves from that. They'll also save on financing costs, and the advantages as far as property value increase also become significant. Whenever someone adds a certain amount of solar to their property, it increases the value 1 for 1. So if $20,000 of solar is added to a home, that's a $20,000 property value increase that a home can have. And those numbers are actually determined by Lawrence Berkeley National Labs. So it's not just pie in the sky. They actually did a 15-year study of the impact of solar power and home communities and building sales. So if anybody liked that article specifically, let me know. I can get that over to you so you can see more details on it. On top of that, there's also the value of solar study done by the state of Vermont. And what it found for each home that actually goes solar, it lightens the load on the utility, therefore reducing the amount of power the utility has to create and causing a net savings for even people that didn't go solar. So those are very interesting studies and some of the key advantages of utilizing solar power. So now, gotta get into the politics of solar. If you remember last election cycle, we had 2 amendments that were on the ballot. One that was in last August, that was Amendment 4. Amendment 4 said that we want to secure the option of people to have solar and use it on their homes. Everybody loved that, it passed. In November, we had Amendment 1. Amendment 1 was, to say nefarious and underhanded would be saying it lightly. It was very convoluted in its wording and its understanding. It made it seem that if you voted yes, you're actually supporting solar, whereas you weren't. You were actually solidifying the monopoly by the utility companies for solar. Now that amendment luckily failed, and there was a resounding and overwhelming proof that people actually want to go with solar. And since so many people want to go solar, taking advantage of it on a residential application and on a commercial application is going to become more apparent and more common, which is why as realtors, it's going to be important to you. Because if someone's able to explain the option of going solar as when someone's interested, that's more likely going to be a sale because that person is more committed to doing something environmentally as opposed to someone who's not as knowledgeable and has very little understanding of how it works. The biggest holdback I see in people is that they have a mentality that solar is expensive, and it's just not the case. In the last 5 years, solar has come down 60%. It's now reached what's referred to as grid parity. So that means it costs roughly the same to use utility power or to use solar. So why not just go with solar? So now, with the passage of Amendment 4, it actually had to have a subsequent implementation bill, which is SB 90. What SB 90 does is continues the tax exemption for sales tax and a property exemption of 100% for residential applications and 80% for commercial applications. And this 80% actually takes effect in January of 2018. So if someone had a commercial property that they installed solar on today, they would end up paying 100% of the property tax increase for that. Whereas if they install in January, they only have to pay 20% of that. 80% is exempted. Right. So now, originally Amendment 4 said 100% exemption, but once it actually hits the legislative floor, people start talking, lobbyists get kicked in, and things get watered down. So it was an understandable, give up, just to make more of a win-win. It wasn't exactly what we wanted, but everyone was amicable with the situation. And with the implementation bill of Senate Bill 90, it also added consumer protections. Most reputable companies, just like most reputable real estate organizations, don't need a consumer protection to make sure that the wording is legible, that it's explained and understood by the person purchasing. But there have been some underhanded people that they felt that we needed the consumer protections just to ensure that there was insulation from that and a recourse for someone in the event that somebody swindled a homeowner with that. So that's particularly going to be evident. And now is the time that most companies are starting to look at it so that way they can take advantage of it come January. And you also see a better return in the fall and winter months in Florida because you get just as much sunlight but you're not running your AC, which is a huge power draw, so it increases your net metering. So it's always good, better. I feel better in the fall to get your solar, but any time of the year is good. It's just a matter of the energy use is going to be higher during the summer and spring months than it is during the winter and fall. So that's the politics of it. Now, there's another aspect of the politics that's recent and occurring essentially as we speak. There was a legal battle between Solar World and Suniva that brought a trade lawsuit And that went all the way to the Supreme Court. Now, what they based their lawsuit on was unfair trade practices. There's very limited domestic production of solar panels in the United States because in places like China and Southeast Asia and around the world, it's less expensive to manufacture. So the market's actually been flooded, which is a double-edged sword because it's great in the sense that the pricing of solar has dropped so dramatically that so many people can take advantage of it. And it is now the leading industry in the entire world for employment and the leading growing energy source for energy production. It's more impactful around the world because we are blessed in the sense that we have probably one of the greatest national monuments being the utility grid that's so connected everything that we have power everywhere we go, which isn't always the case when you go into places like India, China, Asia, where even now we see Puerto Rico is connected to that, where it's very difficult to get power in locations. Solar gives it the advantage of just putting in an energy facility right there and then get it in that local spot without having to worry about lines going all across the country. All right, so in those areas, they're able to produce solar panels for less and then ship them into the United States. The price has been so low that the United States market can't compete. The only thing we produce over here are premium high-end panels, and there's actually a company in Boca Raton that's manufacturing panels. So we have some homegrown solar panels, but with this lawsuit, it was evident that we did see that they had a case, and the Supreme Court agreed with them. So now, what's happening at that is that they're going to be imposing quotas and tariffs for solar panels coming into the country, which is going to make it more viable for domestic manufacturing, but it's also going to either bottom out the drop in pricing of solar panels or increase the price of solar panels. And more than likely, with the way that the current administration has been for energy policy, it's going to raise prices. So get panels now before everything changes. But that's something
how
that's...
long that's going to take to change, you said?
I would expect they just had the International Trade Commission going over it now, and as of last, I want to say Friday, they put out their recommendations of what to do, which is less than what even Solar World and Suniva asked for. But the final decision is determined by the administration.
So it could take.
It won't take a year. Let's say that it'll be less than a year that we'll start seeing changes, but it could be a matter of months. You know, it's like, and I mean like 2 or 3. There's no way to exactly tell, but the first round is already through, and it's up to the president to determine what the final say is on that. So again, if you have somebody thinking, considering it, you want to tell them to get it now before it becomes, more expensive. All right, so from there, system payment options. The big change in solar, I'd say the biggest change in solar is that there's financing available. All right, this was not the case 5 years ago. It was very rare and rather difficult to get financing for solar, and many banks and lending institutions didn't quite see the need or the future of it, and that all has changed. Solar now is, it's basically getting a small compact car. Average system for a home can be in the 25 to 35,000 range, maybe a little bigger depending on the size of the home. That's a small vehicle. And taking that electricity payment that is just a transition in the budget from the polluting status quo to renewable energy, it stays the same. So it makes it pretty much a no-brainer to go for renewable energy over that. So now, the best savings, if somebody does just pay for a system outright, they avoid financing costs, and just have the most savings right off the bat. So now, the financing that is available for it is as a home improvement loan. It's a FHA 1, if I remember correctly. All right, so with that, the interest on it is simple interest. It's not variable interest like is for many home cases. Somebody theoretically pay 2 or even 3 times the value of the home from the principal. Solar, simple. Same amount, beginning, end, And most lenders, there's no pre-purchase penalty. So whether they pay everything over the term, or if they pay it the next day, it's not going to be significant impact on the pricing of that. So now the standard terms for financing is generally 12 or 20 years, depending on what the homeowner wants to do. For my personal home, I chose 12 years, just because it pays off a little faster, a little bit higher payments, but I have a longer time period of no electricity, of no utility bill. Now, we do also have some new government programs that are becoming available. The first one is PACE, Property Assessed Clean Energy. So whenever a home or a business does any improvements, whether that be windproofing or weatherproofing their windows, waterproofing, or adding renewable energy, those clean energy improvements are available to be able to be financed based off the equity in the property. So it bypasses the need for credit. So particularly if someone's been in their home a while, they can use equity that's built in to pay off their system right off the bat, and that has more flexible financing options in many cases compared to a conventional loan that's related to a credit score. All right, and then for commercial applications, there's the MACRS, the Modified Accelerated Cost Recovery System. This actually takes in the depreciation and allows a company to write that off in large sums in the beginning, to making the time to pay off the system less. So that one's particularly important to commercial properties and very significant in their rate of return. So now what also is available between commercial and residential is the solar incentive tax credit. Florida as a state does not have a renewable energy plan. So there's no rebates, buy-offs in our incentives for going renewable. The federal government does. 30% of the installation costs of the system is able to be credited for whatever tax responsibilities they have for that year. In particular, it's pretty simple. If a person got a refund, they're probably not eligible for the ITC, whereas if they paid taxes, they could fully take advantage of the ITC. Now, this incentive tax credit is also being phased out. So it's a matter of taking advantage of it now and soon before it steps away and is not a viable option anymore. The key about it is in this year, it's at 30%, and in 2019, it's going to drop down to 26%, and then it's going to be phased out through 2022. So taking advantage of it now, you're going to get the maximum 30%, and even that 30% can be applied to the tax credits for up to 5 years. So even if their tax responsibility wasn't fully used up in the first year, they have time to use it up over that. And then, obviously, if you're down to 26%, they just left money that's on the table for that. And that is available for both commercial and residential applications. So now, actually going solar. What does it take and what's there to do? My company, we do solar assessments, no charge. The key is just to have people find out their options. Once people can see the numbers, they can see how much it makes sense. So when you have someone that's interested, just say, hey, Clifford, I got somebody that wants to know about solar. We'll do an assessment for them, no charge, whether they're just getting into the house or whether they've been in the house for a number of years, or if they're looking to get out but leave a home behind them that has solar. All right, so the main thing is just look at the numbers. A lot of people just have that mentality, as I mentioned before, that everything's really expensive. And 5 years ago, that was the case. Today, it is not. All right, so I've talked about all the glorious advantages and wonderful reasons to go solar. But what would be the things that we don't see? What's the behind the scenes, the disadvantages of solar? The first thing is that solar is limited by the amount of sunlight that it gets. If there's a big, beautiful oak tree in the front of the house, there's actually shading the south portion of the home, it's going to block the best location to actually get solar. So that shading is going to lower production, and I personally wouldn't like to have to chop down a tree just to get solar in that area because trees play a very important part in sequestering carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases, filtering those out. All right, and the second main one is space. I have done a proposal for a gentleman. He has a roof that's small on this side, really big on the opposite. Guess which side's facing south? The teeny tiny small side. So it was just limited to the space that you have available there. And then his home is actually on a golf course. So putting an array on the ground as a ground-mounted application isn't an option for him either. So space is the other limiting factor with solar. Outside of those two, there's really no disadvantages outside of that.
Do you also, does the roof have to be a certain age? I mean, obviously a newer roof
Right.
would be better, but would you say, oh, this roof is too old, you're gonna have to update your roof to be able to put these on?
There are some cases where that would be, and it would just depend on the age of the home. Roofs are generally replaced in about 12 to 15 years. So if you had your roof and it's going to be replaced in the next 1 to 2 years, I would just go ahead and replace the roof now. Now, if somebody had a roof that they weren't looking to do it in 5 years, I wouldn't tell them wait 5 years and then get solar, because they're going to miss out on the incentives of having solar. Number one being the pollution that's going to create in 5 years, and number two being the incentive programs that are going to be phased out from the federal government. So now the solar panels can be installed, and then when they go for the new roof, they can be taken off.
Is that to take them off and put them back on it? And do the roofers do that, or does somebody else have to put them in?
Generally the installation company will come back out, pull them off, and put them back on. There's a fee that's included in that, but again, I would recommend that because you're still going to have a considerable savings by going solar, and paying that fee to just have them taken off and put back on is going to be nominal in the long run, not to mention the environmental impact. So that is possible, but even with a new roof, the solar is not going to impact the warranty. So their warranty will still be intact and established, whether it's through the insurance of the installation company or the insurance through Crew. What we have is a 3-tiered system. If the installer were to go out of business and not be able to handle warranty issues, we have an escrow account that's going to be able to take care of that. If the installer and the finance company were to somehow go under and not be able to take care of any warranty issues, we have an escrow account that's going to be that's set aside to take care of that. If the installer, the finance company, and Crew were all, for some odd reason, went out of business, we have an escrow account that's going to handle any warranty issues and take care of that. So we have that added level of protection just to make sure that anything that might happen will be covered and taken care of. All right, and solar tomorrow. New technology and expansion. The biggest thing that we see in solar is that even when someone's limited, they're trying to take advantage of the space they have available. You can see in the pictures I have here, carports. When a roof doesn't have enough space or doesn't have enough area, people have the option, if they have a large parking lot, to put in a carport. And that way the solar panels can be right above those. Keeps the cars cooler, keeps people protected from the elements, and it's a big advantage of that. Legoland actually put a solar pathway where it's all covered as they're going into their facility. So the options are just expanding. Now there's also other options that we're coming together with as a company where we're going to have basically an extra room put on a property with solar panels on the roof. So that way if someone has a particular style of manufactured home that can't have solar on it because it's not secure enough foundation, or if they're in an area that doesn't permit them, or if they just got that nice terracotta tile imported from Spain and they're not going to put that solar on the roof, we have an application where they can put it on the ground. The thing about ground mounted applications is that generally they're more expensive than a roof mount, just because of the standards to be able to withstand wind and hurricanes in the area we're at. Solar panels themselves are designed to handle Category 3 hurricanes. Miami-Dade, though, has a standard that says it has to be able to withstand Category 5. So all of the hardware and materials needed to make sure they can withstand Category 5 has become de facto standard, so everything is installed at that level. But to do that on your roof is going to be less expensive than to do that same thing on the ground. So that's new technology that's coming in. And the second one we touched on, which was storage. The more companies are getting in the storage game, the more storage will be available, the more options people will have. Personally, I really love the idea of the saltwater battery. It's the most environmentally friendly, and it has a better potential life in comparison to standard batteries. The lithium ions are great batteries. They're very sleek and low profile, and they take up very little space. So they're still a great option in themselves. And lead acid is kind of beginning just to phase out, just because of the manufacturing hazards, the dealing with acids, and the complications of the batteries themselves. Their life generally isn't as long as the lithium ions or the saltwater batteries. And then we just have new technology that's coming around. There's MIT created what's referred to as the air-breathing battery, which uses sulfur and I believe sodium, and actually exhales oxygen. Breathes in and exhales oxygen. But that's cutting edge, brand new stuff, and you know it's going to be coming in the next few years. But that actually brings another double-edged sword. A lot of people are so interested in the new technology that they wait for that to come out. But by the time they get that technology they've been waiting for comes, there's something new. So they wait for that to come out. And by the time that comes out and becomes affordable, there's something new. And it's just a perpetual cycle. So where a person never actually does anything because they wait for that cutting edge stuff. In particular, the solar roof tiles. They're awesome, they're sleek, they're sexy, but they're astronomically expensive. To do the solar roofs that Tesla has is about 5 times to do a conventional solar, rooftop solar like I've been describing here. So that's not cost effective for the masses. I mean, that's really the equivalent to someone getting a Toyota Camry or Mercedes-Benz, or a Rolls, or something along those lines. If someone can afford that luxury, by all means, go for it. But it's going to be a bit before that technology comes to the point where the average person can afford it. So just because it's new and fancy and sleek doesn't necessarily mean it's what somebody should go for. The tried and true, proven, reliable is generally the best one to stick to. All right, so now I have a real world example for you. So I'm going to pull up some slides on a proposal that I have for a building over in Fort Myers, so we can see what the numbers actually look like. And Bob had asked for a commercial application, so I brought that as an example. So this was done by Solar Site Design. This is our commercial partner that focuses on commercial applications. So now you can see here, we went with a rooftop production for the solar, and this particular array is 38 kilowatts. So now they ran out of space on the roof, which was that limiting factor I referred to, so we actually gave them an option of putting in a carport that further has more solar panels so they can reach that 38 kilowatt capacity. So now, what this system is going to take care of is about 20% of the power that the facility will use, which is rather common. In residential applications, it's more common to get closer to 100% or exceed 100%. For commercial applications, it's not always the case. It's just limited on that amount of space. They do tend to have those big open roofs that panels can be installed at, but even that may not be enough to handle the power needs of the facility. So in this particular case, it's handling 20% of the power. The system installed is going to be $91,200. In comparison to what they're paying right now, year on year, their savings is going to start at about $2,500. So just reducing 20% of the power and switching to solar, they're saving $2,500 per year, which over time is really going to be accumulated. Because over the 30-year life of the system, they're going to save about $155,500. So just by reducing 20% and going with solar, they'll save $155,000.
That's before they take the cost of the project out, right? I mean, that's just their savings, and then the cost of the project is separate.
Right. So if you took in the cost of the project, it would still be $60,000.
Right.
All right. So they're getting about the investment rate of return is about 7%. Their blended savings comes out to about $0.05 per kilowatt, and their payback period is 12 years. So now we look at the graph here. You can see that 80% of the power is from utility, and the green is the power from solar. So now with this, The 91,200 with the federal incentive tax credit, they're going to be getting back, as far as a credit, $27,360. On top of that, you have the Macker's discount that has the Macker's incentive that takes into account the depreciation of another $27,132. So their final cost at the end of the day is $36,708 once all those incentives are taken in. So it's
That's pretty good.
pretty good. And coming out, you can see here, based off their power usage, with the way the utility company has them on their budgeted plan, they get spikes here in March and in November to balance out the reduced price for the rest of the year. So now, with the incentive tax credit of 30%, that's that federal program that I referred to before, and that one is going to be phased out. So that one, that's key to take advantage of now and through the end of next year. So after that, it's going to be reduced, so they wouldn't get that full $27,000 back. And then the Macker's plan, you can see right here, it's broken down over 6 years. Whereas the first year depreciation, they have federal tax reduction of $46,000, and then $12,000 year 2, and down to $2,000 by year 6. And that's taking into account the depreciation of value in that. So over the total of that, they're going to have a tax deduction of $77,000. So now what this one is, and I'm not able to see it well, but this is basically what their electricity bill is right now. They're paying roughly $1,600 a month for their electricity costs. So now, once we include solar, it drops it down to roughly $1,400 per month, and that's where we get the savings, $25.56 over the year.
That was a year.
Yeah, over the year. So roughly $200 a month is what they're saving on that. But the key is, it's not the reduction in the monthly, it's the reduction over life. Because that monthly is essentially the same amount as they were paying before, except over time, they're going to save considerably. So now, this chart right here shows those deductions right in place, and how by year 12, they go from all the investment being paid off, and now they go into the profit portion. So now that over time is going to come to $154,000.
And you stop it at 30 because that's the life expectancy of the panels, right?
Correct. Of the system.
Right.
Yeah. You can see right here there's a jump in year 15. That's when we're expecting to have a new inverter as far as a maintenance cost.
Oh, okay.
All right? So they have that calculated in. So at the total, all costs, everything, the savings comes to about $95,000, even taking into account the system investment. So it's still almost $100,000 in savings over that 30-year life. So it's very significant and very noticeable on that. So I mean, the potential there is, I mean, I can't emphasize enough how considerable it can be financially and then for environmentally. But I do some legislative actions. I do some lobbying. I've been up to Tallahassee and I met with Representative Fitzenhagen, and I met with people over at Senator Pasadomo's office and touched base with them. And basically after discussions, the key feature is we have to show them the money. If we can show legislators and businesses the cost savings and the financial advantages of solar, we can actually get legislation through that will either stop legislation that will hamper solar or provide legislation that further assists and helps solar. The key is just making sure that more people can see the advantage that this can bring. So any questions? Any other questions on that? All right. So now, what other questions do you have in particular about solar or any other applications or anything that's been coming to mind? I know the biggest one I get from people is, how much is it going to cost me?
You said that, didn't you?
I did.
25 to 34.
Well, it depends on the home size. Now, someone could have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, one with a retired couple, one with
That's
3
what you're saying on
teenagers,
Monday.
right? That's how you can get the 25 to 30,000. For my home, my system's $24,000. I'm going to be having a 7.62 kilowatt array put on it, and that's going to handle about 108% of my power usage, if not a little bit more. And mine is oversized because I intend on adding getting an electric car and adding a charging port for that. So I added a little bit bigger onto mine. Most homes, when I write a proposal, I target it for about 90%, and that way we have about 10% margin, you know, and to make it more cost effective and keep it a little bit below or at what they're paying currently for their utility. We have particular technology that, based off of maturation of solar, that we've used the advantages of technology rather than the advantages of adding more panels, which many companies would do. Need more power, let's just add more panels. We actually reduce the power usage through what we refer to as a harmonic filtration energy management system. And that energy management system reduces the amount of power that the home's using, and that way you don't have to add as many solar panels, and keeps it more cost effective.
So if you install this on somebody's home and they sell their home now, they're older retired couple now sells their 3-bedroom home to a family with 3 kids, and that family now is creating more usage, then you would change the system up without adding panels or add panels. What would they do?
Well, you look at the options of when that happens. If it were to happen and you still had space on the roof, we would just go ahead and add panels.
Okay.
Because solar is very Lego-like in the sense that you can just add more onto it without really having a significant impact on the system performance. So now, if somebody didn't have the space to add more panels, we could go with the ground application and adding that extra roof or shed onto that system, so that way they can get more power that way. Or they could just go with a configuration like we showed in the example, where only 80% or 70% of the power is coming from solar, and the other 30% they're using from the utility. Because the other thing is, since the system is grid interconnected, anything that's beyond what the solar has would just come across as an electricity bill. So if when they sold their home, their system is done. They have no electricity bill, but they need more power than that, they would just get an electricity bill $5, $10, $30, $40 to cover any shortfalls.
And then the opposite way would happen if a family of 4 moves out and an older couple who would maybe wash their laundry twice a month. You
Right,
know,
right.
Who knows? You know, they don't cook every night, they eat out, and you know, they go to bed at 8 o'clock, then they would be getting a refund back from the electric company, because the electric company then would be purchasing it, is that?
Right, more net metering, correct.
And if somebody's interested in a home that already currently has solar panels, then how would they know, I guess, what it's creating, I guess, the amount of power? Does it matter, or is it?
Well, first off, the system has real-time monitoring, so you can see on a cell phone app how much power the system's producing and what the history of their system performance has been. So they can see what the expectation will be for that, and then determine what their situation is once they're actually in the home.
And then a home inspector wouldn't inspect that. Do you guys do that at all, to come and check the system to see?
You can actually tell how the system's performing just from that app. If it's performing nominal, or if it's having some drop, it shows that there's also some sort of issue.
Okay.
And a home inspector would see if there were any issue with the system, they would see any water damage or animal intrusion or something. Solar is very low maintenance. It's pretty much set it and forget it. All right. Florida, we get enough rain that it keeps the panels clean. So it maybe once a year, at most every 6 months, if they have like a pine tree or something close, to have the panels just wiped down. And most pressure washing companies can do a soft wash and get those taken care of without having anything that's going to be high impact.
And you talked about whole house. How about, does this kind of stuff do when you hear like the solar pools, or is that a whole different system?
Well, the solar pools are a different system. Those are solar thermal, and these are solar photovoltaic.
You get a heat pump, and then you run the heat pump off the solar panels.
Could that be an
So that
electric
takes, that takes care of the energy there.
That's
Right,
correct.
the same thing, okay.
Yeah,
Well,
so that,
It's a net
It's the same result, different way of, it's another way to skin a cat. When you have the black thermal panels, it takes water and circulates them through the panels, or some sort of fluid, circulates it through the panels, heats up that fluid transfers the heat into the pool. When you have an electric heat pump, that would go off your meter, and the electricity that runs that would go for the photovoltaic panels.
Okay.
So it'd be a different application for
I
it,
see the difference.
whereas, but
Okay.
this black thermal panels only do the water.
We'll only do the water.
The photovoltaic panels will do the electric heat pump, the refrigerator, the washer, dryer, and all the other appliances.
So in the winter, when you're not using your electricity for your air conditioner, you'd be using it for the heat pump on the pool. How's that,
That's
huh?
true. It's a balance out.
Sorry, I'm late. You know,
No worries.
Man, we could have used you earlier.
I had an emergency come up, had to go with that. Not to interrupt, I'm sure you already went over, Clifford. Warranties on this are how long?
25 years, and the system life is expected 30 years.
So 10 years from now, if there's a problem with the panels, you come out, fix it, and there's no charge?
Correct.
Or is there no charge on the panel, but there's a charge for the labor?
It would depend on what the situation is. When we look at the monitoring and see the system performance, we can generally see what's going on. Most cases, it's going to be an inverter failure, which happens around the 10-year mark, where the inverter would just need to be replaced or refurbished, and we actually have that included in our plan, so it wouldn't be any cost to that. If there's some other issue like a tree branch fell on it, we might be able to service that, but now you're talking about a labor cost.
Right.
You know,
And that makes sense.
right, and it's all reasonable that we have built into it.
Are the batteries involved with this?
Not in these. Batteries are an over and above. We can get the option put in and have batteries financed in the plans, but as far as the standard configuration, it does not currently have batteries right now.
I imagine if you're producing electricity, and, you know, if I'm going over things you already went over,
It's
excuse
fine.
me.
This is
But
a
if-
class, we can do that. So.
But if you're producing electricity and you're producing more than you're using, then it's going back to the electric company, and then when you need more, so essentially you really don't need batteries then, because the electricity, the electric company's buying that excess power off you anyway.
Correct. Batteries are not a requirement, but since people have become more sensitive during the hurricanes, people are looking to batteries and they want batteries. It's just a matter of cost effectiveness for those battery applications.
Yeah, but if you lose your power during that, you're not gonna lose it in your house.
Shuts down
No.
the system.
There's a safety feature in the system that if utility power went down, the system would also go down. And that's because when you have a technician servicing that line, if that down line is dead from the utility but it's live from the home, that technician can get hurt. If it hits a body of water, anybody around that could be hurt.
So if you flipped off the power switch in your home, the breaker, okay, the system won't work.
Well, there's a separate disconnect, but essentially, yes, the system will shut down. Now, what you do is if you have batteries and you do that, it will start running off the batteries and not the utility, and that's what we refer to as the islanding effect. So you're just an island of power, as opposed to everyone else who would be out of power, because you're running off your batteries.
Is there some type of switch or whatever that you can put on the electric panel to tell it, well, you know, I flipped the switch, so continue to produce electricity for
Absolutely.
me?
Right.
So
what
that's an additional cost.
No, that's built in. That's the islanding switch. When the islanding
I'm talking about without batteries.
without batteries, if you flip that switch, it would just disconnect everything. Because it's expecting to have batteries there or some sort of storage there. Because it's just like your laptop. If you pull the battery out of your laptop and you disconnect the line, the laptop's going to go dead. There's no power there. But if you disconnect the line from the wall, that's essentially like flipping the switch, it's going to run to the batteries. Or whatever storage you have.
Why couldn't it be configured like a generator though, where it disconnects from the power
Because the power that's
grid side
Yes,
and still
the
be able to produce?
the power coming from the solar panels is not even. So a cloud can come by, the power drops, next thing you know, all your appliances shut down, cloud goes away, and then they comes back
So
up
that's why
or
you
some
need-
sort of
that's
reset.
why
That's why you need
batteries.
That's why you need the batteries. The batteries allow it to even out.
Where do you
Water
put
is one of the
batteries
best
at?
things to use as an example. Batteries could fit new
Yeah.
applications.
Oh,
You can put
boy,
it in
that
the
was
kitchen if you
shocking,
wanted.
dear.
Yeah, you can actually put them in the kitchen. You can put the battery fit on the wall right there.
How
There's
big
one
is the
that's on the
batteries?
wall. Depends on the application. You know how much power you need. There's a 6.4 kilowatt battery that's maybe about this high off the wall and about 10 inches thick. You have one that's the 10.4. It is just over 4 feet wide, about 3 feet tall, you're welcome, and about 10 inches thick. And then you have, those are your lithium ion options. If you go with the
what do
saltwater
they run?
battery, it's about the size of a pallet.
Okay, what do they run?
You're looking at between 6,000 and 8,000 for the saltwater, but it's looking at, you need to look at how much you want. The key is how much power you need and for how long. That's what's going to determine the price. For a standard home, just to make it through the night, 4 kilowatt system should work, and
Okay.
that's in the range of about 3,000 to 6,000, depending on the manufacturer.
Well, let me ask you this then. I want to have a jack on the outside of my house that goes to the electric panel. Okay, and I think I'm answering my question as I'm asking it anyway. But if I have my generator hooked up to the house power at that point, will the solar panels work?
Yes, you'd have two streams between the solar panels running your meter backwards and you'd have the generator running your meter backwards, but they'd be competing with each other, and you have an overpower potential situation, and that could be a safety hazard. As front sense, it could blow out, fuses or your circuit breakers and the like. You generally don't go with generator and solar. You would do solar and batteries or generator.
But like Bob says, when you get a hurricane that comes over and it shuts down the system, you don't have any power.
Right.
Now I got my generator going.
Right.
So my generator's going, but now we got the solar the solar panels there as well. What happens in that instance?
Well, the solar will be disconnected because you end up having that line hazard where the power could get fed out. Now, if you even had that
So
solar
there's a switch to turn off that as well. Is what
safety
you're saying.
disconnect, that'd be correct. Now, what you would do, instead of getting a generator, take that money and invest it in a storage system, being a small battery bank, instead of the generator, and that way you have that place to put power. And I mentioned it before that if you do it as that option to go with the storage battery instead of a generator, you're using it daily as opposed to just one time when a hurricane comes by. It was 10 years before a major hurricane hit Fort Myers. So if you had that generator just sitting in your garage for 10 years, that investment's just sitting there.
I know.
Whereas if you had spent the
I
same amount of
know.
money on batteries, those batteries could be used
And my
daily.
generator doesn't want to
Gets you for your
start.
net metering, and you do run an issue. Like the generator sits for 10 years, and then when you go to use it because you need the hurricane, it doesn't work.
We're supposed to test it.
Right.
Yeah, I know. Well, what you're supposed to do and what you do, Bob. What's the life of the batteries?
Depending on the types of batteries. Lead acid generally goes about 5 to 10 years. Lithium are about 10 years, and saltwater batteries go about, they say 20 years, but you can switch out the electrolyte, switch out the saltwater, and have them run another 20. So those have an extended life, but they are some of the newest technology that's come to market, and it's become widely available. So they're still determining exactly how it is, because it hasn't been around 10 years to say that it can truly do. Excuse me, it has been around for the 20 years to say it can truly do the 20 years.
Yeah, because see, if I buy a battery
Mm-hmm.
and it only lasts 5 years,
Well, that's generally the lead acid. The lithium ions are going to go about 10 years. So it's just like your water heater. In 10 years, it'll go. But in 10 years, with the way that pricing has dropped and the advancement of technology, you'll probably end up replacing it with another battery that can go longer, or another system that can go longer.
of course, since you like us here, that we all get discounts on things, right?
Absolutely.
That's what I like to hear, man.
Plus, I have an incentive program.
Okay.
So for every home that goes solar that you recommend,
Mhm.
we actually compensate you for.
Okay.
And then I have to figure out how exactly that falls into your RESPA as, disclosures to make sure you let them know, hey, if you do this, I get a kickback, something along those lines. But with what I'm trying to set up with that program, it's going to be pretty encompassing over the entire state. So there's potential that it can bypass RESPA. But I'm still in the works and I'm still. Well, in general, just a person on the street said, hey, Clifford, I got a friend of mine who wants solar. I'm like, great, thanks for introducing me. Here's $500. Thanks for talking. And then if it's a bigger system, I can give more.
Yeah, well, we'll see what goes on. So, sorry I couldn't make it, Lisa. I had, I didn't want to be redundant with some of the questions. This is something I've always been interested in anyway.
Hey, no problem. This is what I'm here for. The key and the main focus of my business has been improving the learning curve.
Yeah.
A lot of people just have old information. So rather than just trying to find those one-off people, I'm out talking to everybody. And it may not be that you need my information right now. You might need it in a couple months.
I'm not interested in other people out there. I'm interested in myself to begin with.
That too. But the key is, once you get it,
Yeah.
you're going to get a friend, neighbor, somebody walking down the street
Right.
that's going to be interested as well. So once you know you have that safety net of, I'm going to pay you something for finding that person.
Yeah, okay. Well, I got your card. I guess I'll just give you a call to make an arrangement for something
Absolutely.
down the line.
Yeah,
But
I highly
when I
recommend it.
hit Carol to agree.
Yeah, no problem. Main thing is just seeing it. It's no charge to do an assessment.
All right.
So I'll come by, show you the numbers and what everything entails and what we can do for you, and you can make a truly informed decision there.
Yeah.
And that's
What's your
the-
average system go for? And I know you say it all depends on the people, but
Right.
just roundabout, what's an average system go for?
Home applications, it really depends on how much power you're using. As an energy advisor, I help you find out your solar options. The most important action is to simply go solar. We all have a role to play in the renewable future of Florida. Crew makes it simple to go solar. All we have to do is look at your latest electricity bills to complete a solar assessment. Email your latest electricity bills to the address below, and I'll get back to you with your solar options. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to stay up to date on the pathway to going solar. Now I want all of you to go forth and spread sunshine.